Hi. So I just wanted to wish you everybody a happy Thanksgiving before I get to my post. I'm in Canada, so obviously happy Canadian Thanksgiving. Just a reminder again that you have only a brief time to sign up for Eschaton 2012, which is going to be happening on November 30th until December 2nd, and I will be speaking there on the last day, on Sunday, on December 2nd, about gender issues. So, curiously topical. There's an idea that's been going around on the blogosphere and the video blogosphere with regards to Schrodinger's rapist. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the term, the idea is basically that whenever a woman meets someone, a man, that she has to sort of consider him both simultaneously a rapist and not a rapist. Now, the reason she has to consider him not a rapist, obviously, is because the majority of men are not rapists. Unfortunately, the reason she has to consider him a rapist is because she has no way of knowing if he is. And the onus on avoiding rape is always with women. So I just wanted to talk about this idea a little bit more because a lot of guys get really insulted because they're just like, how dare you, I'm not a rapist, how dare you accuse me of being one, this is wrong, I'm just a nice guy, you know, women are bitches, yada yada yada, and then it usually devolves into a bunch of name calling and basically gets nobody anywhere. So in order to basically start off the topic, I'm basically going to explain what it's like for a woman basically in this day and age. Media tells us that if we get raped, it's going to be in a dark alley somewhere because we were dressed too provocatively and some guy we met at a club or some random guy jumping out of nowhere that we've never met before is going to jump at us and threaten us and rape us. Unfortunately, statistics don't actually match up with that. The statistics say that 95% of all sexual assaults actually happen with somebody you know. And actually the number one location for rape is in the victim's home, and the number two location is in the rapist's home, which suggests a certain level of relationship between the victim and the person who's assaulting her. That being said, if you ever look at the advice that's given to women on how to avoid rape, the rules are always directed at this small percentage, and despite the fact that 95% happen with somebody you know, only about 2%, maybe between 2 and 1% actually happen the way that people think it does, in a dark alley with some random stranger. With that in mind, sorry. Sorry about that. I got a text message from a friend who has my car right now, which is why I felt the need to check that. Anyway, so that being said, all of the rules pretty much follow something like this. Don't go out by yourself. Don't go out after dark. If you're meeting somebody for the first time, make sure you meet them in a public place during daylight. If you're going out alone, make sure it's in a well-lit area with a lot of people around. And basically things of that nature. I think you get the point. Now, a lot of women, too, really object to this because they're saying to themselves, you know, how dare you, I'm a strong woman, I don't live in fear all the time. In fact, you know, I take my own destiny into my own hands. And I counter that with, yeah, you're a strong woman, but I bet you still don't go out at night after dark by yourself. I bet you still don't go into neighborhoods that you consider dangerous by yourself or at all, and usually not after dark. I bet that if you go out to a club or a concert, you feel more comfortable if you're going with friends. All women do something to protect themselves. It might be different from every woman to woman. I mean, for her, it might be fine just to dress more modestly when she goes out after dark, which on its own is kind of a fucked up idea. A woman might decide that she can go out, that's fine, but she's going to bring a bunch of her male friends with her to make sure that somebody has her back. Yes, Alex points out, even though those are the likeliest perpetrators. At the same time, women still want to meet men. We still want to get laid. We still want to have relationships. We still want to engage occasionally in casual sex. So how do you balance those two ideas? How do you balance the idea that you might go out and meet someone and you might end up being a fun lay, or you might end up being a great relationship, and how do you balance that with that the same guy might end up sexually assaulting you? Moreover, how do you combine the fact that just because you're looking to get laid, or basically to go have some fun and have some sex, that if you do end up meeting somebody who does actually sexually assault you, and yes, it can happen, even if you are looking to get laid, the sex you get might not be consensual. So keep that in mind. Then how about the fact that if you do go out, to a club to meet somebody, and then you end up getting sexually assaulted, that the chances are you're not even going to be believed about the fact that it happens. And that's the other really scary thing, is that not only do we have to worry about protecting ourselves from getting sexually assaulted, but then if it happens, well, then we get blamed because obviously we did something wrong. Oh, because, every woman who gets raped, well, it's obviously her fault because she dressed too provocatively. She shouldn't have gone to a club. She shouldn't have been wearing that much makeup. She shouldn't have danced so provocatively. She should have made sure she had friends with her, or any other reason about why the victim is at fault. Because it's always the victim's fault. Don't you know that? And unfortunately, girls do. We know that. We know that if it happens, it's our fault. If it doesn't happen, it only didn't happen because we made sure it didn't happen. How fucked up of an idea is that? So women do stuff to protect themselves, and that basically idea is that whenever you're in a situation in which you can't be 100% sure of the person you're with, you do things to protect yourself. I'll give you an example. A couple years ago, before I met Alex, I was actually engaging in online dating. It seemed a great way to meet people, especially since I was busy and I wasn't a really big fan of the club scene. So I was basically putting myself in a position where I was letting a lot of people know about me, about the fact that I was interested. And a lot of these people, even though I'd get to know them online, I still didn't know who they were in person. And then I'd want to go and I'd want to meet them. Now the problem is if in that situation I ended up in a situation where somebody was going to rape me, nobody would have believed me. Nobody would have, or, even if they had, even if they said, yes, got raped, poor you, we'll absolutely catch and arrest the guy. But you're kind of to blame yourself because how dare you look for love on the internet? How dare you put yourself in such a dangerous situation? So what do women do? We protect ourselves. When we go out on the date, we make sure our friends know where we are. We ask them to call us at some point during the date to make sure we're still okay and see if maybe we're getting some kind of creepy vibe from the guy. You meet them during daytime. You meet them in a very public place where people might know who you are. My favorite area was always to go out for coffee to Starbucks, where actually a lot of the people knew who I was and were able to sort of step in if there was a problem. A friend would always, either text me or call me at some point throughout the night, and you'd always make sure to answer that phone call. Please excuse the weird chiming noises in the background. Like I mentioned, it is Thanksgiving, and Alex is doing me a favor, and he's peeling potatoes right now. With that in mind, not the potatoes, what I was saying before. With that in mind, think about what you're doing. You're making sure a friend calls you. You're making sure to meet in a public place. Everything about that encounter is set up under the premise that not everything might be okay, which means this guy might be a rapist. He might be a homicidal maniac. Schrodinger's rapist. That guy, chances are, is not. He's probably a nice guy just like you who just wants to meet somebody and end up in a relationship or end up just having, some fun. But there's no way for me to know that. There's no way for me to guarantee that. And so I protect myself. Now, a lot of guys chime in with, well, what about the girls who, falsely accuse men of rape? That happens extremely rarely. In fact, more often than not, if a woman is actually raped, even if she does report it, she won't be believed. 80% of sexual assaults that happen never get reported by the women who deal with them. That statistic is actually even more terrifying if you consider that that's based on people that we know have been sexually assaulted. So this is people who might still get counseling or might talk to people, and based sort of on projections from that. It might be a lot more. There's a lot of sexual assaults that happen where a lot of people don't think they're sexual assaults. Encounters with doctors that leave you not quite feeling right, or a situation with your boyfriend where you feel really uncomfortable afterwards, where you just feel like something happened that really shouldn't have happened, where you were pushing him away and you were saying no, 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 but somehow you still ended up having sex. Sorry? marital rape is something that happens a lot, but we don't talk about that. You know, it's women. I mean, there's the extremes of it where you actually have men who say, well, I don't care what you think, you're my wife, it's your duty to have sex with me whether you want to or not. And then you basically have the guys who think that, oh, well, if I keep pressuring her into it and then she eventually gives in, even if she looks completely uncomfortable, it's still okay. And while, you know, there is a responsibility for both genders to, you know, try to please the other partner, and this applies both to men and women, there is a limit. If you're really uncomfortable, if you really don't want it to happen at that moment, it shouldn't. And, you know, there is a level at which it stops being just the partner, you know, doing something they're not really all that into to make their partner happy, and them actually leaving the situation feeling violated. And that is not a pleasant feeling. In fact, it's a terrible feeling. There's, to give you an idea, that moment of violation, that moment of knowing that you stop feeling human at that moment. In reality, you stop feeling like anything you say, anything you're feeling matters. At that moment, your body, which is something that, you know, is supposed to give you pleasure, is actually giving you extreme pain. You feel like you've been betrayed not just by the person that you're with, who you had some kind of trust with, but you've also been betrayed by your own body, and you've been betrayed by your own gender, and you've basically been betrayed by the whole world because there was nothing you could do to stop it. A lot of victims of sexual assault will end up taking out what happened on their own bodies because it was the tool used to hurt them. What's worse is once it happens to you, it's really hard to ever forget it. And you can be in a situation that's something you're normally very comfortable with, that you feel great about, and something about the situation will just set it off, and you will just feel exactly like you did in that moment when you were violated. That's what we call a trigger. It's basically that moment where you actually relive your rape, and anything that happens at that point just goes in to feed into that fear again, where, you know, even your partner who you completely trust and you know he'd never do that to you, at that moment, him even just touching you to try to comfort you could make you lash out at him, because you just have no control over that moment. Because you're just in this ball where you're realizing, like, oh my God, I can feel it again. I can feel that pain. I can feel that torture again. And you stop seeing your loved ones around you, and you just start seeing nightmares. And it's at that moment, it's not just your, you know, reliving your betrayal, but it almost feels like being betrayed by your mind as well at that moment. And it's terrifying. So yeah, it's not surprising that women will do anything they can to protect themselves from that feeling and from having to live through that. And the worst part is that even when we admit to it, we just say, yeah, you know, I look out for it. I'm careful so that it doesn't happen to me. Even then, we're not believed, or we're seen as being overreacting, or we're exaggerating. There's no winning. If you admit that you're being careful, well, then you're a prudish bitch who thinks every man is a rapist. But if you don't protect yourself and you do get assaulted, well, then you're an idiot because you didn't protect yourself. Well, then shit, what am I supposed to do at that point? Seriously. And yeah, you know what? It might hurt your feelings. And you might be a great guy. And you might never hurt a woman. You might even be a feminist, you know, supporting us. Great. Then what's your responsibility at that point? Your responsibility at that point is to understand why I might feel uncomfortable in some situations. And it's your responsibility at that point to help me get to that level of trust with you where I can reasonably calm my fears enough to say, hey, this guy's genuinely a nice guy. And he's genuinely a nice guy because he took my concerns under consideration. Yeah, you want to call yourself a nice guy? Try being empathetic. Try actually considering what kind of world we live in, and then adjusting your behavior accordingly. Because that's what being a nice guy is actually about. And that's Schrodinger's Rapist in a nutshell. And if you really want to see that change, you've got to change the box. And you've got to change the poison in the box.